couple of weeks ago, we talked about the idea of not having faith and how Jesus calmed the storm because he didn't like the idea that they didn't have faith, and he used the form. We unpacked it to discover a lot more than what's on the surface, and he used the event to express disappointment and weak faith. As a result, he instilled a stronger faith into his followers. And today we're kind of looking at the other side. Well, we're exactly looking at the other side of that coin. So we're examining an event that demonstrates a faith so strong that accepting the worst case scenario, even being burned alive, is acceptable to those who have that kind of faith and those who believe that way. The theme that I bring up all the time in church is that we worship, trust, and love God because of who he is and not because of what he will do for us or what he can do for us. My relationship with my wife's not based on what she can do for me. It's based on my love for her because of who she is. And, when you take that to the highest level of love for God, it should be no different. We can only experience true love and loyalty based on how driven we are to love, why we love the person. You can't do it based on our expectations from someone else. I always tell people, that's not what that kind of love is. What you expect and what you get are never the same thing. They just aren't from anyone. That carries over to God. In fact, it often takes us a very long time to understand that not getting what you expect is actually a blessing. It's rather than a curse. And you get older and you get wiser and you look back and you start to see that and you understand. When we accept that God's decisions are based on our needs rather than on our wants, we can have 100% confidence in the outcome, no matter how hard it may be to understand at the time. And sometimes it is. It's really hard to understand. The verses that we're mainly referring to, we're going to refer to today are all on that slide. Daniel, obviously, is the long one, and that's going to be the one we're reading from. So if you are following along or you want to follow along, there's not a handout. Those are the verses. Isn't it interesting that, we do see later that we get from God what we needed instead of what we wanted. We want changes in our circumstances. How many people pray for that? People pray all the time. I got this jerk I work with. Can you just put him somewhere else? Give him another job. Let him get transferred. We want God to change our circumstances. What's he do? He changes us to deal with the circumstances. We want an immediate cure for a terminal illness. If you love me, you'll do this. Sometimes God pulls us in the pain closer to him. We don't get the cure. We get closer to him and we long for the eternal perspective. We long for the eternal comfort. We ask God to soften our reality a lot. Instead, he prompts us to look for his. We ask God to keep us from poverty a lot. Instead, he helps us escape materialism and worldly lusts. We ask God for prayers, but give me some patience. I can't take this. I need patience. There's too much. And God sends us trials to test our patience. We ask God to save us from this world. Basically, that's what it all comes down to. And God saves us from our sins. So in every case, we don't see at the time that God has suspended what we want to give us what we need. And it's so important to understand that his ways are not our ways. In Isaiah 55:8, my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. Accepting God and all of his truth hinges on accepting that first truth above and beyond everything else, that he does not think as we do. I don't understand. We're not going to understand the mind of God. That's why we have to trust. This is why we love God. Again, it goes back to because of who he is, not because of what he can do. And now to get to the meat of this discussion, unshakable faith that we see right there in that picture is from the book of Daniel. Now, before I just jump right into the verse and start reading it, I want to give you some context about the book of Daniel. It starts at Babylon's first attack on Jerusalem. The Babylonians ransacked Jerusalem. They took everything, they trashed the place, and they captured Israelites. to take them back. Now, four of the Israelites were from the royal family of David, which, as you may or may not know, is the same bloodline Jesus will eventually come up out of. And their names were Daniel, Hannah, Mishael, and Azariah. But when they were taken as captives, they were renamed. Daniel was named Belteshazzar, Hannah, Shadrach, Mishael was Meshach, and Azariah, Abednego. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And one of the primary purposes of the book of Daniel is to show their struggle in keeping hope alive when they were enslaved. The first six chapters focus mostly on these four. That's not Daniel in the center, but that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. Until it gets to chapter 7 through 12, where it talks about Daniel and his visions of the future, our future, by the way, the future. That's kind of like a broad overview of what the entire book of Daniel is about. These four men from the royal family of David, once taken into and enslaved by the Babylonians, were pressured to give up their Jewish customs, to change everything, to assimilate to Babylonian society, their beliefs. They gave up a lot, but they would not stop worshiping God, the one true God. That's where they drew the line. And as a result, God intervenes, and their king, the Babylonian king, which is Nebuchadnezzar, actually elevates them in status. Now, these guys were already refined and wise when they were captured, so they were chosen to serve in the palace, the king's palace. And it's worth mentioning, I think a lot of you already know this, the book of Daniel is vast in lessons. There are many, many lessons. This is a book that is sometimes studied for weeks on end. But today we're focusing on a particular event for a specific reason. And it's what I said the opposite of a couple of weeks ago. Weak faith. Christ being upset with weak faith. This is faith that's tried and true through a fire. So Nebuchadnezzar has this statue built about 90 feet high. It's made of gold. It's got gold over. I don't know if it's solid gold or what it is, but he commands that everybody worship this statue, right? Everybody has to bow down and pray to this statue. When the music goes off, the horns, all the instruments, they use their choir to start the music. You bow and you pray to this statue. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would be put to the test. The penalty for refusing to bow to this statue, or contextually speaking, as I go along here, as you already know, the statue represents the world in our life, what the world is, the idol of the world, the idols the world brings us. When the trumpet sounded and everyone bowed down before the giant gold statue, they did not. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not. And a couple of people, just like always, snitched on them. There's always a snitch. There's a snitch. I came from the old school. Snitches get stitches. But there's one in every crowd. Snitch. So someone came forward and said, they didn't bow. They told on him. They snitched on him. So he was furious. King Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He gave him a second chance. He actually gave him a second chance. He basically told him, look, I'm the one who has the power to kill you, okay? I can kill you. I can throw you into the fire. Me, right here, flesh and blood. See me? I control the guards. This invisible God that you worship and all that who's not here is not asking you to bow down and worship. I'm commanding you to do it, or I'm going to kill you. So you need to tell me who this God is. Either bow down, or I'm going to throw you in the fire. If you refuse to bow down, just do me one favor. Explain to me who this is that can deliver you from my hands. You're right here. Explain to me who it is that's going to come along and take you from me and stop this from happening. Tell me who this God is of yours. And here's their response, along with the rest of the story. Paul Harvey. The rest of the story. Daniel 3:16 through 30. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered, and they said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you on this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. And he commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, and their garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because of the king's command was urgent, and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste, and he spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men into that fire?" They answered and said to the king, "Yes, king." "Look," he said, "I see 4 men walking in the midst of that fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the 4th man is like the Son of God." Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, administrators, governors, the king's counselors, they gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire wasn't even on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, and he said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut in pieces, and their house will be made into an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this." And then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. It's pretty heavy, isn't it? It's a long reading. It's a good story. Tell me where your God is. I'm going to kill you. He's not going to stop it. You explain to me who he is. He will save us. And if not, we're not going to bow to you or your idols or your statues. They go in the fire. Nothing happens. They see a 4th person in there. The king freaks out and says, "Oh my, their God is real." Throughout this entire event, we see God's faithfulness to those who trust him implicitly. Now, implicitly is the key word. Remember the opposite of a couple weeks ago where they were freaking out. What are you going to do? Aren't you going to save us? These guys, the strongest words in the Bible, the Faith Testament, is "but if not." Can you imagine? They said, he's going to save us, but if not. Some translations say, and if not. God will save us, and if not, it doesn't matter. They trust him implicitly. They don't care what the outcome is. Has no effect. The outcome has no effect on their trust in God. None. God, can you please save me from this situation? I didn't get saved. Okay, well, I'm not going to believe you anymore. These guys aren't like that. These guys are the way God tells us to be. You don't base your relationship with me on what the outcome is. You don't base it on that. Many of us determine how much we trust God based on how well he comes through for us. We can't be that way. It goes back to what I said earlier, and you'll probably hear me say it again before the day's over. We trust God because of who he is, not what he does for us. Job 13:15. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about facing the struggle of keeping faith through circumstances that are so bad we feel like we're being attacked by life, by the world. Today, we're seeing the example of what it's like to not have that struggle. No struggle at all. These guys had no struggle in their faith. In fact, their faith was so strong that they were completely willing to accept God's actions if God chose to take no action at all. And that is strong faith. But if not, But if not, God will save me. And if not, in other words, I completely trust God to deliver me from this situation. But if not, my ultimate destiny lies with him in eternity. I have nothing to fear and certainly no reason to bow down to your idols, the idols of this world. The idols of the world now. I mean, yeah. The idols of the world now, worshiping dirt, killing infants, butchering teenagers, genitalia, in the name of transgenderism, which thrusts them into the highest demographic of suicide in human history, because later they regret it. They want to change back. They have no meaning in their life, and it's a horrible. These are the idols of the world. People inventing their own truth. That's the idols of the world. Affirming the mentally ill as having their own truth. We tell them your own truth. We lie to them. The person in charge of mental illness here in Pennsylvania is mentally ill, but nobody wants to say that. That's politically incorrect. No, it's not. It's the truth. Truth comes to all the parties it wasn't invited to. We tell people your God is feelings. The God of the world now is feelings. We tell people their feelings matter more than truth does. No, buck stops here. No, it doesn't. With here, I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about God. Buck stops here. And they knew that. There's no truth in your idols. There's no truth in, we've put up with enough of your garbage. We put up with enough of it, which I'm getting to that too. But those are the gods that we're asked to bow to now on a daily basis. Now, I'm not talking about, I'm not suggesting that any of us as Christians go out into the world and engage in civil disobedience or lawlessness. These guys didn't do that. I'm not suggesting we do that either. I mean, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had a lot of tolerance. They put up with a lot. They ate food they were forbidden to eat that they're not supposed to eat. They wore clothes they didn't like, they didn't want to wear. They went to events that they didn't want to go to. They even tolerated being renamed, cultural named, giving names, serving in a palace from those who invaded their land and oppressed their people. I think they were quite tolerant. They were quite tolerant. They didn't engage in any civil disobedience. They put up with a lot. But that's where they drew the line. They absolutely drew the line at bowing down to idols. I am not going to bow down to an idol. I am not going to, for us, the translation, the life application, I am not buying into a world system that stands in direct opposition to God. I am not participating in the aspects of a world system that stand in direct opposition to Christ. I am not. That's where I draw the line. I pay taxes that you use for things I would never spend money on. We got all kinds of problems in our societies. This isn't about red and blue, Democrats, Republicans. This is about the world. We participate and tolerate enough, but participating in anything that's in opposition to Christ has to be where we draw the line. And that kind of faith, things aren't going to go our way. There's people in jail for standing up for Christ. Again, I'm not endorsing any civil disobedience. I'm talking about having God come first in everything we do. They drew the line. What I am talking about is adhering to the strict biblical position listed in Joshua 24. Did I put that up there? Yeah. Basically, I could read the whole verse, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's it. There's craziness going on out in the world. I got to deal with that all the time, but it stops at my front porch. I'm not gonna. These guys tolerated a lot. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord because I know He is my refuge. He will deliver me, and if not, that's right. So be it. I serve God not because of the temporary satisfactions He can give me in this fallen world ruled by the prince of darkness. I mean, think about it. That's really what the payoff is. God, give me everything I want. Okay, well, you can have it while you're alive in that body in this temporary fallen world. Is that what you want? No, I want eternity. I want the secure citizenship in the eternal kingdom of heaven because I know God makes decisions. This is the most important part. God makes decisions based on information that we don't have. And that's why when we want something from God and God gives us what we need, we don't see the whole picture. God's not subject to time. He knows what's coming down the road. Why'd you do this? Why did you take my aunt? Why did you give her an incurable illness? Our whole family loved her. What did she do? God sees everything coming, sees what's going on in eternity, sees how that loss will make other people come to Christ, sees how that loss will make a hurting person make friends with another Christian. He sees all the things that loss will do, but we can just think about us. That's not what I wanted. God sees what we need. He sees all the good that can be taken and used from something we perceive as bad. That's why we trust God again, because of who he is and the fact that he has information that we don't. That's how he knows what we need. Daniel, incidentally, was also tested later. The most common story of the book of Daniel is Daniel in the lion's den. He was caught praying in private. And guess what? Another snitch. Somebody snitched. Always a snitch somewhere, isn't there? And I remember in Sunday school, we'd hear about Daniel in the lion's den, and the pictures always looked like he was 15. He was 83. He was 83 when he was put in the lion's den. Take an old man? That's pretty brutal, isn't it? Did you see that old man praying? Yeah. That's against the rules. Yep. You know what? Let's feed him to the lions. Seems a little harsh. Guess what Daniel said? I don't care. So be it. So be it. And he was delivered. The fact that the faith of all four of these men, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Jesus, an angel, the Holy Spirit, however you want to put it, I just say God in the fire with them saved them from the fire because of their faith. But if not, that's what, when you have that kind of faith, I don't care if God makes no action. I love God. I trust God. That's the kind of result you get. I promise you, if you exercise a doubtless faith like this in your life, you will virtually extinguish fear. You will extinguish all fear. These guys would accept death before disobedience, and they got life because of it. They were given life and uplifted. You know, the men were thrown in that furnace, and there were four figures in there. That's not just, that's us. That's our life every day. One person. You're not one person. God is standing right next to you every single day, this far from your face. You ever feel like somebody's watching you? That's because somebody is watching you. There are people, there are things that we can't see with these biological globs in our skull that are all around us, and they have a vested interest in you. Oh, they are so interested in you. They're deeply, deeply interested in you. And our disbelief that they don't exist is what the bad ones hope for. And faith like these are what God commands that we have. Feel like you're being watched, because you are being watched, and so am I. God sees what's coming next and why. To trust him is to experience deliverance in all circumstances. All circumstances. I'm telling you, when you think about this, you think about this faith, you think about the furnace, you think about God being in there, you think about the things you want, the people you don't want harm to come to, and it comes to them anyway. You remember those words, God will save me, but if not just means it's not happening in this moment. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It guarantees, that kind of faith guarantees that you're saved. You're safe with Christ. You can overcome all the obstacles, regardless of what they look like. All right.